Oh, it's participation trophy season once again as the USMNT's January camp roster drops, and it is filled with very interesting picks by Gregg Berhalter. Today I'm going to break down this roster, who's on it, why they're on it, what is going on, and also I want to talk about what are we doing with the camp cupcake, the non-FIFA January camp. What up, guys? I'm Pete Douthit, host of the 11 Yanks Show. Welcome. Smash that like button, smash that subscribe button if you're new while we talk about this roster. So, guys, because we have the Olympics coming this summer, this should have been an Olympic roster with just maybe a few, 2 or 3 or 4 guys to help fill out certain positions that needed depth. Instead, it ended up being about half of an Olympic roster, missing many Olympic eligible quality high ceiling players, and instead we brought a bunch of extremely mediocre mid to late 20s players from MLS who are not good, not technical, not going to ever contribute anything meaningful to the men's national team, don't deserve a spot. We're just handing out participation trophies at this point. We are devaluing what it means to receive a U.S. men's national team cap. We're devaluing with this roster, with rosters like these. That's Gregg Berhalter, so of course we're devaluing what it means to represent the men's national team, that is something that you earn with quality play, right? By being an actual good player. There are tons of guys who can just put, I was ex-U.S. men's national team players because they got these January camp cupcakes call-up when they didn't deserve them. It's also being used as an MLS promotional tool. That's all this is. It's a preseason MLS promotional tool. Oh, this guy got a supporter shield last year. Let's put him in the roster. He's from Cincinnati. This guy, it completely blows my mind that we use these rosters to make such mind-numbingly stupid roster decisions instead of actually building an identity, looking at players that have a bright future, that have high ceilings, that have good technical quality. But it's Gregg Berhalter. This is the guy that U.S. Soccer wanted. This is the guy that U.S. Soccer is sticking with. So let's go through this roster one by one. Okay, so first it's the goalkeepers, and the goalkeepers are not terrible, all things considered. The only guy missing from here is Chris Brady. Now, again, if we're talking about Olympic-eligible players, then Chris Brady should have been on here. What we don't know is, did the Chicago Fire refuse to release Chris Brady? Because if they did, then this group of goalkeepers makes perfect sense. If they didn't, then not including Chris Brady is nonsense. Only Patrick Schulte of these three, Roman Celentano, Patrick Schulte, and Drake Callender, are Olympic eligible. The other two are good young. I mean, Drake Callender's not young, but Roman Celentano's young. And, Drake Callender had a good year last year. Decent to good year, I would say. Neither of them is very good with their feet, so I don't see any of these guys having a very high ceiling long term. But if you're competing for the third goalkeeper spot right now, and let's face it, Matt Turner isn't going to be playing probably starting in January. Hopefully Ethan Horvath gets some minutes, but that third spot is still up for grabs. But for the Olympics, I hope we see Patrick Schulte starting this game because he is Olympic eligible. And if the Chicago Fire didn't release Chris Brady for this camp cupcake when they have 0 games happening, what are the chances they release him for the Olympics? What a decrepit, useless organization, the Chicago Fire. They've been so shit for so long as a club, as an organization. They just re-signed everybody who contributed to them being shit this year. This last 4 years, the manager gets re-signed, George Heights gets re-signed. I'm not going to turn this into a Chicago Fire rant, but it just is baffling to me how a club that can be so awful for so long continues to get a free pass. But here we are. Hopefully Patrick Schulte gets some minutes. I probably wouldn't hate if Roman Celentano got some minutes, but I really wish Chris Brady was here. Overall, I'll say this about the goalkeepers. Of all the different positions in this camp, this is the best one. Yep, it just gets worse from here. Let's go to fullbacks now. And there are 2 good picks here, Caleb Wiley and John Tokin as the left backs. The other 3 are Dewan Jones, Nathan Harriel, and Shaq Moore. Nathan Harriel is Olympic eligible, so that makes sense to have him here. Our other Olympic eligible right back is Brian Reynolds, so he obviously wouldn't be, released for this camp because he plays in Europe. So, Nathan Harriel makes sense. I wouldn't have a problem with Dewan Jones being here either. He's been decent for the USMNT in the past in the Gold Cup. And even though he isn't Olympic eligible and won't be on that Olympic roster, or maybe he will be because he can play right back and left back. So who knows? But I have no problem with Dewan being here. He's mostly been solid as an MLS fullback. Shaq Moore is the one that is mind-numbingly baffling. Once again, 27 years old, so not at all Olympic eligible. This is his peak, and his peak is terrible. It's a guy who Gregg even earmarked as like, well, Serginho Dest is banned for that first game in the Nations League against Mexico, so we're looking at Shaq Moore. Really? The guy who, under no pressure at the World Cup, not a single player around him couldn't even take down a simple ball. How is Gregg still calling up Shaq Moore and acting like he's a viable option for the U.S.? It's idiocy. It's complete idiocy at this point. You have Joe Scally, who's there to back up Serginho Dest for that one game. And if you need coverage for Joe Scally, Tim Weah, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Brian Reynolds, Marlon Fossey, Chris Richards, Tyler Adams, Leonard Maloney, Cameron Carter-Vickers. There's about 10 guys that I would rather see play right back if something happens to Joe Scally in that game than Shaquille Moore. But these are the 5 fullbacks. 4 of them are okay. It'll be interesting to see, Wiley or Token. I don't rate Harrio very highly, but for the sake of this camp, he's Olympic eligible. So I'm good. There are some guys in this roster that are Olympic eligible that I don't think are very good. But because I want it to be an Olympic eligible camp, I'm fine with you bringing a guy who is at least eligible for the Olympics and giving him a chance to prove himself, right? Bringing a 28-year-old makes absolutely no sense at all, unless it's a 28-year-old who's in the B team. Let's say Miles Robinson. That would make sense because, you don't have access to all the European center backs. So from the MLS center backs, that would make sense. Speaking of center backs, we have Ian Murphy, James Sands, Miles Robinson, Nkosi Tafari, and Jackson Reagan. And, look, James Sands and Miles Robinson's makes some sense to me because we don't have a lot of good quality center backs. Actually, we don't have any good quality American center backs in MLS, okay? We have very precious few. And by good quality, I mean by the global standard, guys, not by MLS standard. So don't say, he led MLS in shutouts. That means nothing in the global realm of things, okay? But Miles Robinson and James Sands are not high quality players, but they are guys who, if you're going to call them American center backs, they're among the top few in MLS. Jalen Neal, is he still recovering from injury? Did the LA Galaxy not release him? Jalen Neal is a lock-in starter for this team. What about Brandon Craig? What about Josh Winder over in Benfica's academy? They 100% would have let him go if he was in their academy. Those are guys that should be here, as opposed to Ian Murphy, Nkosi Tafari, and Jackson Reagan, who are, I'm sure nice guys, and I'm sure if you're a fan of Dallas or Cincinnati or Reagan, you love them, and you're going to get mad at me for saying they're not USMNT quality. But I'm sorry, they're just not, okay? Anybody who's watched them play for any meaningful length of time could tell you right now they're not USMNT. To be honest, Miles and James aren't USMNT quality either. But at least those are guys that could challenge for the B team from a USMNT perspective. Reagan, Tafari, and Murphy, not so much. Midfielders now. We have some good, some not great. Sean Zawadzki. I think this is just you won MLS Cup, or you are listed on the team that won MLS Cup and you run around a lot, so therefore come on in. 26 years old, not a good quality player. Why are we calling him in? Josh Atencio, not super high on this kid. I think he's very mediocre, but the kid is 21 years old and Olympic eligible. So I have no problem with him being in this roster. Although, where is Obed Vargas? To me, Obed Vargas has a much, much higher ceiling than Josh Atencio. You could bring Josh, and you could bring Obed Vargas instead of Sean Zawadzki. Aiden Morris is here. Aiden Morris is well-deserving of his spot, captained the crew, or maybe he didn't captain them, but was one of their best midfielders this season. Still young and probably not USMNT A-level quality, but certainly from an Olympic perspective and from this camp cupcake perspective, he deserves to be here. Jack McGlynn, likewise, has been, pretty good for Philly. Still has some weaknesses, but is Olympic eligible. Wicked left foot. Great range of passing, certainly when he's not under pressure. Hope he goes to Europe soon, but well worthy of his spot here. Tim Tillman, I am not quite sure on, because I wanted to see Tim Tillman come and really, really dominate MLS in a meaningful way, and he didn't. He was good at times for LAFC, but at the age of 25, is he really an option for us moving forward? No. Azio Jackson, I've watched this guy play for St. Louis. Guys, this is not a quality player either. He is Olympic eligible, so, sure, at this point, you could probably call him in, but he's probably not worthy of a spot. Well, Pete, you have all these guys. Who else should be here instead? Well, I'll tell you. For example, if you got rid of Azio Jackson, Tim Tillman, and certainly Sean Sawatsky, you could bring Obed Vargas, you could bring Brian Gutierrez, and you could bring Ben Kremaski. Maybe make a push for Noel Buck. You know who else is a midfielder who is listed as a winger? Because it's Gregg Berhalter, Diego Luna. So how about you just bring Diego Luna, Obed Vargas, and Ben Kremaski? Now, you can't tell me Ben Kremaski wouldn't have been released because they released Drake Callender. So they definitely would have released Kremaski. And Obed Vargas would have been released because they released Atencio, so it's not a club thing. Gutierrez, I swear to God, if I find out the Fire didn't release Gutierrez and Brady, I'm going to lose my shit on that club. All right, let's go to wide forwards now. Cade Cowell, Diego Luna, Bernie Kamungo, and Esmir Baraktarevic. Look, Diego Luna is the guy I'm most looking forward to see in this group. He had a very good ending of the season with Real Salt Lake, under 20 standout for quite a few years, and a very technical profile. So, of course, an attacking midfielder at Real Salt Lake gets pushed wide by American coach Pablo Mastroeni, also pushed wide by American coach Gregg Berhalter. What is it about we American coaches that love to take creative attacking players and shunt them to wide areas because we don't think they're going to run around enough like a chicken with their head cut off? Bernard Kamungo has a great little story, former refugee. Also had a interesting end of the season with Dallas. Definitely showed some flair, some technique. Curious to see what he looks like in this camp. We don't have a lot of good wingers at the Olympics. That's just reality. There's Taylor Booth and Kevin Paredes, who are both eligible. But other than that, we don't have a ton of guys. And if Paredes goes with the senior team for Copa America, we will need some wingers to push through. Esmir Baraktarevic is still very, very young. It'll be interesting to see what he looks like. 18. Haven't seen a ton of this kid. Heard some good reports. But it'll be interesting to see what he looks like. Cade Cowell is on the verge of a move to Chivas Guadalajara. My opinion on Cade Cowell is well documented at this point for anybody who's watched the channel. This is a guy who's, a freak athlete, but he's not a soccer player, okay? And his one goal in MLS this last season should be evidence that he's really not that good of a player. I think at youth levels, at under 20 World Cups or under 17 levels, he stood out because of his athletic nature, but his touch is terrible. He's got one attacking move, and that is cut in onto his right foot and curl it into the far corner. And, that gets old quick when teams start figuring out what you do and they just show you onto your left. I'm very curious to see. I mean, look, we're playing Slovenia's B team in this camp. It's like worse than MLS. It's going to be their domestic players from the Slovenian league. So, again, that's why it's so hard to really learn much from these camps, because we played these terrible opponents too, right? Like, yeah, you can look okay or maybe even good against Slovenia's B team, but that tells us absolutely nothing about how much you can really contribute to the senior men's national team. Last but not least, let's look at the forwards, Duncan McGuire and Brian White. Somebody, please tell me, what is the point in bringing Brian White? Look, I don't think Duncan McGuire is a good player, okay? I think he's another one of those who gets a few goals in MLS and people start to overhype him. But at least for Duncan McGuire, you can say, he's Olympic eligible, and we don't have a lot of Olympic eligible forwards. Truth be told, we're going to have to bring Josh Sargent. That's the one that makes the most sense to the Olympics, or Haji Wright if Josh Sargent is with the Copa team, to be the forward, because we don't have any good under 23 forwards. We just don't. Duncan McGuire is the best of a terrible lot. Jesus Ferreira and Brandon Vasquez are both too old, and let's be honest, not very good anyways. But Brian White, he's 27 years old. He's older than both Jesus Ferreira and Brandon Vasquez, plays for the Vancouver Whitecaps. I don't care if he got 15 goals last year in them. I don't care. It means nothing from a USMNT perspective. If you're 19 and you get 15 goals, like Pepe did, sure. But he's 27. This is his absolute peak, playing for one of the worst teams in the league. I just don't understand. I'd rather see Jesus Ferreira or Brandon Vasquez or Nicolas Giacchini, or Indiana Vassilev. At least those guys are a bit younger and have some USMNT, they can contribute to a B or C team. Brian White, what is this? Vancouver Whitecaps wants to sell more tickets? It's not going to help. It's not going to help because they're in Canada, and I don't think they care about his USMNT call-up. Anyways, guys, this is the roster. The only guys I'm really looking forward to seeing here are guys that I think have the possibility to contribute in the future. It's disheartening to see so many scrubs, so many, mediocre players called up. But it is what it is. Gregg Berhalter's in charge. So that is my thoughts on this USMNT roster, guys. Let me know yours in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button if you haven't already. And we'll see you for the Slovenia camp.